Hey, welcome everyone. So welcome to this Fashion Open Studio and COP26 event. We're here with Sindiso Khumalo from South Africa. This event is part of a series of 9 events that we have partnered with the British Council to programme for COP26, which is the UN's climate conference, which is happening in Glasgow next week. If I could just ask people to keep themselves on mute because I'm getting some background noise, that would be really helpful. Thank you. So we're partnering with the British Council for a series of 9 digital events in the lead up to COP26 in Glasgow. And we're really looking at two of the COP26 themes, which is nature and adaptation and resilience, and how designers from around the world are meeting the challenges that the fashion industry faces on these 2 topics. So I'd like to introduce Cyril Naka, who's from Fashion Revolution South Africa, who runs the team there, to say a little bit about their work. And then I'll come back to introduce Sindiso.
Thank you so much, Niamh, and hello everybody, and welcome to this Fashion Open Studio with a very good friend and dear friend, Sindiso Khumalo, who really waves the flag for South Africa really high in terms of what she does. Sindiso is a textile designer, but she is really a passionate designer in terms of equality in South Africa. We are together because we have load shedding, and that's a real issue in South Africa. So when we talk about Fashion Revolution South Africa, one of our issues really is to talk about what really happens in our climate. So we have 11 official languages, we have economic crisis in this country, we have political crisis like everywhere in the world. And what we're trying to do with fashion is we're trying to almost balance things out. Not so simple, but with designers like Sindiso, with Tebe Magugu, Lukhanyo Mending, and the other greats that are doing incredibly proud for South Africans, we're able to really use fashion as an activism. So Fashion Revolution as a global NGO activism gives us a voice. And what we're trying to do in South Africa this year specifically is we took Who Made My Clothes, I Made Your Clothes in the 11 official languages, translated that into our languages, because we do believe that if you want to start a revolution, you've got to speak in the vernacular. Our vision is big. Our mission in South Africa is big because we want to get everybody involved. And the only way that we can do that is if we actually have all voices represented. And so this year specifically, we're also looking at broadening the team. We also need our team to be diverse culturally. It is important. While I head up Fashion Revolution South Africa, I don't get to do this alone. I get to do this with incredible people, incredible designers like Sindiso, who is really spending her time with us today. And I cannot thank you enough for being here. So this is really a little bit about who we are. I also have to mention that fashion, as you know, is massive in terms of polluting, in terms of the climate, environment, and you all know the vision and mission of Fashion Revolution, which is people and planet. And I think you've got to localize it to countries. And in South Africa, our focus would also be in terms of what can we do better in terms of the environment, what can we do better in terms of people. We do have an active union in South Africa. We also have the Bargaining Council, which really ensures that minimum fair wage is maintained. But that's not just good enough. We've got to do so much more. We cannot only rely on government, we have to also rely on ourselves, individuals, and we have to take responsibility. So thank you so much for being a part of this, to Fashion Revolution. Thank you for the opportunity, and to all the partners that have made this possible. We appreciate you, and I hope that you're going to be inspired by Sindiso. I know you will, in fact. I know that you're going to be inspired, and I hope that you can take something out of what she says today and incorporate it into your everyday life. Thanks, Niamh.
So we feel very lucky to have Sindiso with us today. And on this project, as I mentioned, Sindiso is one of 9 designers who was selected for this COP program. And as Cyril said, this program is really about sharing and open sourcing local solutions and tangible solutions during COP26. We know the big picture. We know the enormous and terrifying challenge of the climate emergency, but We want to bring solutional designers and makers to Glasgow to transmit what they've learned, their skills, their knowledge, and show how they're meeting these challenges locally. So we're delighted to have Cindy So with us. And for those of you who don't know her work already, I'm sure many of you do, Cindy So trained originally as an architect and then studied textile futures in London. Her work is very textile driven, I think it would be fair to say. And that's the basis of a lot of where her collections start, as well as storytelling from not only South Africa, but other histories around the world. Cindy So won the Green Carpet Challenge. So I think that gives you a clue that sustainability is deeply embedded in her work in a very holistic way, and she's partnered with the UN and the ITC on various initiatives. So I'm going to hand to Cindy So to say hi to you, and then we're going to play a film that she's made for this event.
Hi, everybody. Hi, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. Yes, as mentioned, we are a textile-based studio. We're based in Cape Town. And I think for me, like a big thing that I say is sustainability is actually about people. And really, that's kind of what we try to do in our work, is really break down barriers and make things accessible, understanding that also sustainability is also very much based on your context. And yeah, I just hope with the video you'll get some ideas of what to do with your waste. And basically just, I think the key thing is just like keeping the conversations going and having this being a very open and democratic space that we all feel we can just input into.
Wonderful. So we're going to now share a film showing two mending techniques that Cindy So's made.
Welcome to my studio. We're based in Cape Town, South Africa. And today I'm going to be showing you how to mend your favorite precious items using beautiful textile techniques such as crochet and hand applique, and yeah, how to mend those really special items of yours so that you can keep them for longer and have them in your life for a long time. I love vintage clothing, and a lot of the time you'll find with your vintage clothes that they've already got a lot of wear on them because they've been around for so long. So today I'm going to be teaching you how to mend a little vintage t-shirt I have, which had a hole in it, and then also a little sweet little knitwear piece, also vintage, and yeah, how to use these techniques to mend lovely items that you may have that you want to ensure you keep them for longer, because the longer we keep our clothes, the better it is for the planet. So the first technique I'm going to show you is a hand applique technique, which is a technique I love to use in our collections. And definitely if you have like a denim piece that you want to, you know, fix the holes, this is a great way of hiding holes. So we're going to end up with this as our finished product. And how we begin is, firstly, you're going to need some applique paper, which you can get at any craft, like sewing craft shop or haberdashery. Quilting shops are also quite good for this, but I got this at our local haberdashery. And then you're going to need some scrap fabric. We have a lot of waste fabric that we ask all our factories to give back to us, which means we just got a really nice stock of different fabrics that we then can use for this sort of exercise. So I always suggest people, especially if you're a sewer, just keep your waist. It's always very helpful in the future. So what you do is you open up your applique fabric, your applique paper, sorry, and then you lay your fabric over like so, and you'll see there's like a sticky side and a non-sticky side. So you just lay it on the sticky side, and then you use iron and just press it down. Give it a nice good press. Great. And now we're going to do the same thing with another piece of fabric. I like to use lots of different prints and different fabrics. Just makes for like a little bit more texture and interest. So this is one of our prints from one of our collections. And we have Old Liberty's fabric. Same process. And so you just got like a range of different ideas, and I just think it makes, again, just gives a bit of interest to what you're doing. Great. First of all, I guess it's coming out with like whatever design you want. I'm going for a very simple quilt style. This is called the North Star print, which we have in a lot of our designs. So we actually did an actual quilt in this, I think 2 seasons ago. So I'm going to be making something similar, but given that it's a pair of jeans, so we'll probably cut this bit off and just focus on making this print. You can make whatever print you want. Right, so to start off with, I'm going to make the square in the center, which it's much easier to make a square when you've got a grid. So I usually like using check fabrics for the center piece because it's way easier. And I start off by just making my square, and I'm going to make it, it's a terrible ruler. Okay. Let's see what I'm doing. So mark out your square. I'm making mine 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters. I think that's a nice size, but it can literally be any size you want it to be. Actually, mark this with a pen. I can't see. So you just mark it out at 15 centimeters. Then we're going to cut our square out. So now you can see I've made it a little bit smaller, which I prefer. It's not as dramatic. Then the next thing we're going to do is cut little triangles to fit into and around this square. So essentially what you want is the length of the square. Over here it looks like it's 11 centimeters. So you want 11 centimeters divided by 2, which is 5.5. And you're going to cut little triangles that are 5.5 to fit around your square. 5.5 length and width. And I'm going to show you how far it takes me down to 11. Sorry. There we go. And then 5.5 the other direction. And then I just mark these out over here. So 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. you cut those out. You're probably gonna need 8 triangles. There we go. So I've got my 8 triangles already ready. Yeah, cut them out earlier. And what I do is I just mark them onto my jeans. And so I can put her like that. So I'm going to do an alternate pattern of alternating triangles. So that's essentially what you're going to end up with as your pattern. And I'm going to do this on a vintage t-shirt because I actually like these jeans with holes. So I like this sweet little vintage t-shirt. I love it. I like the print, it's quite sweet. And it's got a few holes in there. And I'm going to put the applique onto the t-shirt. So I usually like to use the biggest piece on the hole. So what we do is we peel off the applique like so, and we place it down onto, and then we press it down. There we go. Again, just peel the applique paper off. And then you start your pattern. You just work around the t-shirt, pressing your triangles down. And then, there we go. And then, last but not least, the very last piece here. And there you've got the beginnings. There you go. So next we're going to sew down our applique so make a knot, get a thread, make a knot at the bottom. This is just to make sure that it doesn't come out in the wash. I've never really tried not sewing it down, but you just sew it through. Oh gosh, make a slightly bigger knot. Knots are your friends, guys. I mean, the bigger the knot, the less likely your work is going to unravel. So I always put a nice big knot in there. Okay. You go through and across. It's just like a simple hem stitch. It's very simple. You can look up hidden ones, but I quite like that it looks like it's been stitched. And then you just go along your shape. I'm just going to go all the way around the entire thing. I have the finished results of the applique with the stitching all around, which will just hold everything in place. And you've got your little vintage tee with its little detail. All right, next up, I'm going to show you how to fix a little hole in this little vintage top I have. And knitwear, knitwear is always a hole culprit just because of moths and wear and tear. So what we're going to do is make these little ribbons that we're then going to stitch on top over here. And again, it's just a cute little detail. So the first thing to check is whether the ladders come down. If it has, then you have to stitch it up. Mine hasn't, mine's actually just a hole. So what I do is I just go from the back and I just close up the little hole. And like I said, knots are your friends. So give it a nice big knot. There we go. Right, so now you've got your sealed item. We're gonna make these little crochet ribbons that we're just gonna place on the hole because that doesn't look very nice. So I'm gonna put these on top. And let's start doing crochet. First, you need a crochet needle. And some wool, which again, any haberdashery should be fine to find. So we're gonna tie a knot twice. 1, 2, and then you kind of put the thread between your fingers in a way that kind of stabilizes it. And then you're going to go under and through. And this is called the chain stitch. Under and through. And be sure to give it a little tug. Under, through. And you just continue like this for about, I don't know, 10, 15 of these, depending on how long you want your bow to be. So I want a nice big round bow. Be sure to kind of, and this is called your chain. Oops. Just keep going. Under and through. Under and through. And then you feed round. Now I'm like, that's not big enough, so I'm going to keep going for a bit longer. Under and through. And the reason I like chain is it's actually the easiest crochet. Like a long chain is actually the easiest one to do. So this is like beginner, even for me. And then you go through your first hole, bring your wool across, bring it right the way through, and right the way through again, so twice. And then you can start with your next chain. And again, you keep going. So now you're doing your second bow. Back. So now we're going to do another. So we find our hole through here. Get your, so you just go through with your hole, get your wool across, and bring it between both your holes, 1 and 2. There we go. And that's your next joint. So now you've got the ears for your bow. We're gonna work on the legs. Same setup. And just keep going down, and you can make these as long as you want to make them, to be honest. And then you've got the one leg. And then once you've got this one leg, you can actually just knot it up. And again, remember, knots are your friends. I might make this one a little bit longer, actually. Right. And I like to just put my knots right through the middle like this. Pull that out. Got a nice big knot there. And then I'm gonna cut the fluff off. Right, so now I'm missing a leg. And what I do is I actually just join a piece onto the original. So, because you can do this on your own, but you're gonna end up here. So you need to almost start again at your joint and come back to it. So you've kind of got a one-legged bow. So you're doing the last leg, which you do so you do kind of like as a separate leg, I guess. And then double knot. So we're gonna go through the hole. And I wouldn't get too stressed about which hole, like we're just learning here. So, and then down the first hole and then down the second hole. Now you've got it in, so it's kind of joined. And then you can begin to crochet down again. So. Again, you chain stitch all the way down. It's very relaxing to do crochet. And you can make a chain stitch into anything, straps, anything really. Nice big knot in there. And get that nice and tight. And then you have your little bow. And once you've made a few of these, what you do is you just stitch them on, and I just stitch them at the actual middle bit. Little crochet bows onto your hole. That's your first bow. I might just do two bows in a corner. So I'll stitch this one in here also. Come down, come back up. And then a nice big knot, just to make sure everything stays in place. And there you have it. A little cute little crochet detail for your, that's so much nicer. And when you get more and more skilled at crochet, you can begin to make little squares that you could add as patches, as details to your garments. You know, you could make this into a pocket for a pair of jeans that you might want to like jazz up. So yeah, once you get a bit more skilled, you can really go crazy with crochet. And we have used crochet in sort of the last 2 years. We've been using crochet in our collections, and it's just a really nice old school way of bringing in the handcraft into your work. Cool. Now you've got your two pieces, your little vintage tee, which has been hand appliqued, and your little bandeau top. with its crochet bows. And it's just, you know, these are just like really sweet, simple techniques to bring your clothes back to life again. Thank you for joining me.
Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed that. It was very soothing, I thought, Sanjiso. Let's see. If you would like to join us on screen and stitch along with us, feel free to. I think we've got Hannah and Geeta, both from British Council here as well. So we're just going to stitch along. Anything you want to mend, any technique you want to use. If you want to try one that Sanjiso's just shown us, then you can do that. I'm going to post the link actually to the films so that you can watch them again. You might want to assemble some tools and some materials for it, but we're just gonna have a kind of sewing circle chat really. So if you have questions for Sanjiso, either pop your hand up using the raise hand function under reactions, or pop your question in the chat if you don't want to speak. So maybe I'll kick off with a question. I wanted to ask Sanjiso about your own mending practice, because you're a vintage wearer. So when did you start mending, and what was your first mend that you remember?
Good question. So my first mend was probably one of my first vintage pieces, and I was first year university. I didn't really know that it was vintage. It's called secondhand then. I just remember like getting my grandmother was a pattern cutter and an amazing machinist. So I just remember I'd buy things knowing that she'd be able to show me how to make it cute again. I think the first time was definitely first year university, first year out of school. I guess also not wearing uniform anymore, so I was able to just choose what clothes I wanted, where I could purchase them, and they were just amazing secondhand shops in Durban that we would go and buy items from places like the Salvation Army. And yeah, that was definitely, and I had my grandmother teach me how to mend, because say mending lace is very different to say mending woven, very different to mending a knit piece and stuff. Yeah.
So understanding the fabric that you're working with and how it's constructed really helps you if you're mending, or you can learn about it through mending.
Absolutely. And I do think like, I always find like YouTube's just a great place to find out how to do things. Even just exporting this file, I was like exporting on the iMovie, so it's like, YouTube is great for like just figuring out how to do things and how to learn different skills. And there's another website called Domestika. Some of them are in Spanish, some of them in English, but Domestika is another one that I hang out on and watch their videos, because they've got a lot of kind of crafty ways of fixing and adding detail to your garment. And I do think like it's not, we live in this world where we want the kind of like everything to be perfect, but in a way like the imperfection is something that I actually really do enjoy in anything that I'm making. So we do a lot of quilts. Not all the quilts are going to be the same size, but it's that imperfection because there's a hand involved, and I like to almost show that imperfection and celebrate it, basically.
The human side. We have a question from Lizzie Walsh in the chat, which is, what's the biggest challenge that you have in terms of making sure that your clothes, your brand, is as sustainable as possible?
That's very easy question. So in South Africa, we have very limited access to materials. So for us, I think the biggest challenge has been really trying to access sustainable materials, ship them over during COVID, all of that. And you've also got to do this balance. Are you shipping fabric that is sustainable, but then you're shipping it across, and then, you know, that's all that carbon footprint. So you've got to kind of make these decisions on what's more important to you. But I think definitely our biggest challenge has been sourcing materials. And then, but I always say, you know, it's really important to work within your context. So for us, like as a brand, the thing that we kind of push the most within our sustainable conversation is actually about people and getting and social impact and social impact projects that we get on with. And yeah, I think you really almost in a way have to define what problems you're going to resolve within your context and within the frameworks of what you know, problems you may run into. And, you know, I guess with us, because sourcing was such a big issue, I just began to just source either South African wool or South African cottons. South African cottons are BCI. So in a way, they're kind of like, you know, yeah, sort of a better, more ethical cotton to source. But yeah, it's definitely a challenging, and it's a lot of things to square, you know, there's carbon footprint, materials, social impact. And I always say to people, like, just in the beginning, especially not to overwhelm yourself, just focus on one and you figure all the other ones out. And like, I always say to designers, like, don't feel like you're going to solve the problems of the world, like in one collection. Like, I just think like focus on one, get as much knowledge on the one, and then flesh it out sort of over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to hear you talk, Cindy. So both about the kind of balance sheet of sustainability in terms of like, you know, like you're always having to make a compromise between one choice and another, that it's not, I think, you know, sometimes people can think that there's one way to do it right. And actually the more you explore these questions, you're having to balance so many different factors and so many different principles for yourself. But I also wanted to pick up what you said about, you know, how you work with social impact and how that connects actually, you know, how you see them as interdependent between, you know, looking at the social issues that you can tackle through your brand and also the environmental sustainability that you're tackling through your brand.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I always say that basically if you go to any impoverished community or city, or, you know, where there are slums or squatter camps, whether it's in Mumbai, whether it's in Cape Town, wherever it is in the world, you will see environmental issues in those slum environments. So for me, it's about tackling the two together, because you just can't have, you know, just one focus on you have to have both. They're just intrinsically linked in any case. And that, you know, you'll have like terrible water supplies, sewage drainage going into like water, you know, you just have a lot of environmental problems within those areas. So for us, it's about trying to, have the social impact and have that in some way make a change to people's lives who live in those areas. And then hopefully eventually, you know, they're probably for me much stronger candidates of changing the environments that they came from and pushing for certain things when it comes. I mean, we've got elections coming around very soon, pushing for certain things within the elections, or pushing, you know, holding people accountable for the environmental issues that they've had to grow up in. And so I think that for me is just such a key, crucial, they're just linked, they're intrinsically linked. And I think coming from South Africa, I can just see it firsthand when you look at some of the ponds, you know, there's certain ponds which just smell, and, you know, it's just like, you can just tell like these just deeply polluted spaces where in a way, you know, the city's just, I mean, Cyril would agree with me, the city's just neglected parts of this beautiful city called Cape Town, but there are large parts that are totally neglected by the city of Cape Town.
It's a really good point, that I don't think that many people realize how intrinsically linked human rights and environmental issues are, and conservation, and that until human rights, basic human rights, are addressed, those people will have absolutely no incentive to address conservation or address environmental issues.
Yeah, and I think when we put this in the backdrop of COP and who are the decision makers within COP, Sindisa and I think spoke at the very beginning of this project about women being at the table and the disparity between female and male participants and visitors to COP, and also those from communities who are experiencing this environmental degradation firsthand, not being included in the solution making. So I think, also within in a sense, I think Sindisa is probably the designer that we have on the program who speaks most to the theme of adaptation and resilience, because by working with communities and by working with people, it gives them the strengthening and the ability to tackle these problems, be vocal about these problems. So I don't know if you want to say a little bit about that, Cindy. So we have a couple of questions on materials in the chat, which I want to come to next.
No, I mean, definitely. I see it firsthand when I have some of the women who come to work with us, and some of them have actually been trafficked in the past, and they've just come out of really bad exploitative environments, and I can see what a year does and how their voices are stronger. And these are sort of mid-20-year-old women, and I just know, with just a certain level of independence and confidence, those women can then go on to make changes within their own environments. Because essentially also, I always say people want work. They don't want to, hand out or hand me down. People want to work, they want to feel proud of what they're doing. And, kind of what Nikki was saying is that if you want to get everybody on board with, in sustainability and looking after the planet, people need to eat. You need to have the two together. It's impossible to ask somebody about the environment if they can't put food on their table. They're just going to be like, I can't eat. And they also won't feel like they have a seat at the table. So I think definitely bringing as many people to the table and empowering as many people is only to the benefit of the planet and making it a better place for all of us to live in, with, as Nikki was saying, everyone having basic human rights.
Yeah, so that equity being such an important part of advancing any environmental cause. We have a couple of questions here, one from Shirley McLaughlin, who was asking what your thoughts are on mixing fabrics. I suppose, Shirley, is that from a kind of care point of view, or from sort of waste and disposal as well? Because obviously blended fibers can be very, very difficult to regenerate, for instance. I'm wondering, Cindy, so maybe you can talk a bit about the material choices that you've made in your collections.
So, I mean, we mainly from the very beginning have always used materials that decompose. It's just been a really important part of, so we've stuck to cottons, wool, linen, and as I've educated myself more and more on cotton, then we've sort of moved to organic cottons, or cottons that are farmed ethically, and because cotton is really one of the bad boys of fashion. So but I think definitely we use a lot of hemp in our collections. And, we're just really aware of just making sure that things decompose. I think that's just something I really do think about. And that's why I've definitely struggled to buy like a yoga kind of top and bottom legging set, just because I'm like, once I'm done with this, what does this mean? It's like fully plastic. And not all of them, but a lot of them are. And this amazing editor from Vogue Italia, she had a conference and she was showing the number of years, you can probably just Google this, but the number of years it takes for each of these items to decompose. And I think like that sort of lycra set that people wear in the gym, I think took something like 200 years to decompose. where like, you know, cotton tee, I think takes something like 5 years or something. So, you know, the disparity of, so I think for me, definitely what happens to that item after it's gone through all of the processes, you know, it's maybe been in a vintage shop and then, but still what happens after is a big one. And even with trainers, like I'm always, you know, I know a few people in different sportswear brands, and I'm always just like, but we're talking about sustainability, but what are you doing about all the soles of every single trainer that's made? Like there's so many soles, and I, you know, every time I look at trainers, I think, where do these go? And I think that for me is like a big part of like how we make choices, is just making sure that hopefully eventually what we make will, if it does end up in a landfill, hopefully it just disappears. Because I think the idea of it just sitting for like 200 years, I mean, you know, 100 years ago, it was like 1921. Imagine an item living like 200 years. Just, it's, the idea is crazy. And also the idea of like items that were in 1921 still being in existence 100 years from now. So yeah, I think it's a difficult one. It's a really difficult one, because there's a lot of what we have, what we own, that is just not going anywhere, you know.
Actually, the event that we had last week with Rima Rahman and Aranya, it's been embedded in Aranya for the last 30 years. They're natural dye specialists, but they have always talked about design for decomposition. So it's like, if it doesn't decompose, we're not doing it. And also if it doesn't decompose without harming the earth as well. I think it's such a great way to think about material choices. We do have another question on material choices in the chat, which is asking about in South Africa, textile manufacturing. What's happening in terms of sustainability? What are you seeing, and how do you think it might improve?
Okay, I think so. Unfortunately, in South Africa, we lost a number of textile mills, sort of in the early 2000s. So, you know, currently, you know, we do manufacture our own cotton, but we're actually very limited in terms of sustainable materials. And even, you know, I was looking up this one company who do organic cotton, and they were South African, and then I actually ended up finding out that they were actually farming the cotton, and it was from Mauritius. And then so in terms of just sourcing for us, in terms of sustainable materials, it's very, very difficult here. And like you were saying, with the balance sheet, it's like, so do we do the carbon footprint and ship this organic cotton over from Mauritius? And even with the organic cotton, like, you know, no one's to say that like it's been woven ethically. So I think that's the other thing is, you know, because for me, fashion always starts off with people, or sustainability starts off with people. So, you know, even if I were to source this organic cotton from India, or from Mauritius, how am I to know like the rights of that person who wove that?
How is the farmer being treated?
How's the farmer being treated? And, you know, everyone in the supply chain. So, it's a really difficult one, because I think when you're seeking transparency in every element of what you're doing, it becomes very difficult. And that's probably why we just try and source locally, and we use a lot of waste. So when we have an order, you know, when you cut a pattern out of a piece of fabric, you'll always have excess. So we keep all of that excess, and then we use it back into, so we do a lot of quilting and patchwork type things so that we can bring it back into collections. But then again, you know, maybe we can only make, say, 20, 30 of those items, and the shop might want 70, you know, so it's this constant balance also, like being commercial and still trying to bring in this element of sustainability. It's a very difficult balance, like all of them, because you've got to maintain, I'm a commercial entity, you know, I'm a business, but then I'm also seeking transparency. That's why I want to do things locally, so I can see how the people are treated in the places I partner with as, you know, suppliers. And then, you know, it's just all of these, trying to juggle them together. But I don't think there's any one solution. I think you just have to follow what feels right for you, essentially.
As a business,
Absolutely.
as a commercial entity, if you follow your ethos as you are so strongly, it comes through. And like you said, you don't have to be doing every single thing perfect. There's all those quotes about, a million people doing something imperfectly rather than one person doing it perfect, and how much more of an impact that has environmentally.
Yeah, and I was going to say, sort of in the same vein, actually, that do you sometimes feel, Cindy, so that you're educating your retailers in those conversations, even though I can imagine they're very challenging because they also have commercial constraints as well, but being able to bring that conversation to them in a transparent way, how does that kind of shape, I guess the whole value chain?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely it's about, well, I think, whenever you say something's limited, then you can also pitch it as exclusive. So you can say, we only have exclusively 25 of these quilted jackets to go. And so it's also how we pitch it, which definitely helps the conversation. And I'm always very clear about, like, especially with our hand woven pieces, those are hand woven in Burkina Faso on a loom with the human body literally weaving it. And I'm very strict about how much we can order of that, because it'll take, easily 4 to 5 months to produce. And I have to basically make a collection in 3 months. So, but I think definitely trying to strike the balance and, making retailers feel like this is exclusive, it's special because of these reasons. And we didn't just go into a fabric shop and just pull out a whole lot of fabric. We put a lot of thinking and time to making it something special, so that the end user also feels that it's special, and then they'll keep it for longer. Because I do think we can't keep making run-of-the-mill things. I think we need to be making things that people want to keep for longer. And I very rarely buy new clothes. And when I do, it's usually things that, like, I very rarely buy new clothes. I mean, I find it's either like a hand-me-down, or it'll be a friend's brand, maybe to try and support like a new interesting design. Like I'm wearing a friend's brand today, but that's probably as far as newness comes into my world. And I think it's just, we don't need, to be honest, probably all of us in this room have more than enough clothes, period. We could, if this was it, like until the end of our lives, we'd probably all be fine. And, and I think that's kind of like, we just don't always need the newness. And it's obviously it's available to us, but I just don't think we always need it.
We had just a few minutes left with Cindy, so if anyone has a question that they've been dying to ask, please pop it in the chat, or pop your hand up or come on camera. We do have just a few minutes left. While you're thinking about that last question, maybe I'll just ask Hannah and Geeta from the British Council to say hello and say a little bit about the Climate Connection, which is the project that this project sits within COP, which is, some of it's already started in the lead up to COP, but there'll be a lot going on in Glasgow, so maybe they can just give us a quick lowdown on where to find out more information.
Sure. I also have a question as well. So thank you, Niamh. Hey, Cindy. So hey, everybody. Thank you so much for the session. Wow. I think I also found the films really relaxing and like meditative. Like I think, that link between making and relaxation and kind of like meditative practice really came through. And yeah, thank you all for joining. As Niamh mentioned, Cindy's session is part of a bigger program which we're running with Fashion Open Studio, which forms part of the Climate Connection program, which British Council are running for COP. It's not in collaboration with COP, it's happening at the same time, and it's really designed to open up conversations around some of the topics which are being discussed next week. So we're in the middle of the online program at the moment, and there'll also be some physical open studios happening in Glasgow, which I'm super excited about as well. And I think, you know, bringing it back to today and discussion around Sindiso's work, the conversations that we really want to unpack are around this topics of adaptation and resilience and nature, and each designer that's part of the cohort is doing that in a really unique and powerful way. Cindy, so I wanted to ask you, I didn't get a chance to ask a question yet, but I was really interested by your kind of very like people-centric approach, and obviously this kind of consciousness that runs throughout every single thing you do, but also the point around only tackling one thing at a time. And I think that was a really important thing for emerging brands and designers to take note of, because it's something that I think can be quite overwhelming for people to try and tackle everything all at once. And I would love to know if there is any specific kind of groups you'd like to collaborate with that you haven't yet, or you know, kind of people that are producing a specific material, whether that's locally or working with a certain process. Is there anyone that you'd like to work with that you haven't yet, and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question, but and the first thing that came to mind was I actually would love to collaborate with Greenpeace, and like, I watched this David Attenborough documentary, it was 2 weekends ago with my son, and he's 7, and they were showing the rainforest, and, you know, I was like, gosh, maybe I should go train myself, you know, like, I just, you know, and my son watched this documentary, and he was like watching this rainforest disappearing, and he went like this, humans, and like, you know, like, and like, you know, here's a 7-year-old going, what's going on? So I think definitely for me, like, yeah, because there's just so many, there's so, like you say, there's so much to tackle. And then there are things that basically I'm like, we lose this, that's it, you know, like we lose the rainforest, that's it. So then for me, it's then I've got like another kind of more, I guess, activist side of like, we need to stop this, you know, we need to find a way of like stopping, you know, people plowing into the rainforest and building palm trees for palm oil. And yeah, I don't know, it's a very, I think that would be my first place to collaborate. And then I guess definitely like any sort of women's groups across the African continent. I mean, I really do try to make a point to collaborate with female-centric groups, just because also within our African context, you know, whenever you feed a woman, you're feeding aunties, you know, it's a whole web of people that you're feeding. It's not just the mom by herself and her family, you know, it's a whole web. And so there's definitely that, for me, that thing of every time I can empower a woman, I'm empowering so many more people than just herself and her family. So yeah, I'd love to really collaborate with more female groups across the continent, definitely.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I think unfortunately our time for today is up, but I'd like to say a huge thank you, of course, to Sindiso for putting this amazing event together and bringing us into her studio, showing us some of the techniques that she uses on her own clothes as well as in her collections. I'd like to thank Cyril, who will be somewhere in the background there from Fashion Revolution South Africa, and also Jackie May and the team at Twig, who partnered with us on this event. Recommend that you sign up for Jackie's festival of making and mending with Twig, which is happening in parallel with COP26. So thank you everyone who asked questions, and thank you everyone for joining us. If you'd like to watch the film back, I've popped the link in the chat. But what we'll do is we'll just end the live stream now. We'll stay on the line for a little bit in case you're nervous to ask a question. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming, and enjoy your mornings, afternoons, and evenings.